Alexander Alex Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the Boston skyline with cold detachment. At 32, he was now the youngest CEO of Blackwood Medical Industries, but not for the reasons he'd imagined. His father's sudden heart attack 3 months ago had thrust him into a position he wasn't ready for, and the vultures were already circling. "Mr. Blackwood," his secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board members are waiting in the conference room." Alex straightened his Italian silk tie, a habit he'd picked up from his father. The emergency board meeting couldn't mean anything good. He'd spent the last 3 months discovering discrepancies in the company's records, patterns that pointed to something darker beneath the surface of their prestigious medical empire. The conference room fell silent as he entered. 12 pairs of eyes followed his movement to the head of the table, where his father had sat for over 3 decades. Winston Hayes, the company's legal counsel and his father's closest friend, stood up, holding a manila envelope with trembling hands. "Alex, we have a situation," Winston began, his usually steady voice wavering. "The FDA is launching an investigation into our clinical trials division. They have evidence suggesting data manipulation in our latest drug trials." Alex felt the blood drain from his face. The company's newest heart medication, Cardio Max, was set to be their biggest launch in history. Billions in development, marketing, and distribution were at stake. "How bad?" Alex asked, maintaining his composure despite the fury building inside him. "Bad enough to sink us," Winston replied, spreading photographs across the table. "These were taken 6 months ago. Your father—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. He knew about the falsified data. He was trying to fix it quietly. But his heart attack— The images showed his father meeting with various research heads, exchanging documents in parking garages, looking every bit like the conspiracy Alex refused to believe existed. His father had built this company from nothing, had saved countless lives with their medications. This couldn't be happening. "There's more," Winston continued. "A whistleblower is threatening to go public. Dr. Sarah Chen from our research division. She has proof that the manipulation goes back years, affecting multiple drug trials." Alex knew Dr. Chen by reputation, brilliant, principled, and unfortunately for them, incorruptible. She'd joined the company 2 years ago, rising quickly through the ranks due to her innovative research methods and dedication to patient safety. "Buy her off," Alex suggested coldly. "We tried," another board member chimed in. "She refused. She's not interested in money." Winston cleared his throat. "There might be another way. Dr. Chen's reputation is impeccable. If she were to become part of the family, so to speak, it would be in her best interest to protect the company's reputation." Alex's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Marriage," Winston stated simply. "You marry Dr. Chen, make her invested in the company's future. We can spin it as a romance that bloomed in the labs. The media will love it. The brilliant doctor and the young CEO joining forces to carry on the Blackwood legacy of medical innovation." "You're out of your mind," Alex scoffed, but Winston wasn't finished. "Think about it, Alex. The FDA investigation will ruin us. Everyone in this room will face criminal charges. Your father's legacy will be destroyed. But with Dr. Chen as your wife, we can implement her new research protocols, clean up the trials gradually, and maintain public trust. She gets a platform to implement her ethical reforms. And we get to survive." Alex stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "And if I refuse, then we all go down," Winston replied quietly. "Including you. The board will be forced to cooperate with the FDA to save themselves. You'll be the one who destroyed your father's life's work." The weight of his father's mistakes pressed down on Alex's shoulders. He walked back to the window, watching the city below. Everything his family had built over 3 generations could crumble because of falsified data and corporate greed. And his only salvation lay in the hands of a self-righteous doctor who held their fate in her hands. "Set up a meeting," he finally said, his voice hard as steel. "I want to meet this Dr. Chen myself." What Alex didn't know was that Sarah Chen was about to challenge everything he thought he knew about power, integrity, and the true cost of legacy. Sarah Chen stared at her reflection in the elevator's polished doors, adjusting her simple black blazer. The summons to the CEO's office had been unexpected, but not surprising. She'd been waiting for this confrontation since submitting her findings to the FDA last week. The elevator opened directly into the executive floor, where Winston Hayes waited for her. His attempted friendly smile didn't reach his eyes. "Dr. Chen, thank you for coming up. Mr. Blackwood is eager to meet you." Sarah didn't miss the undertone in his voice. She'd rejected their bribe last week, $2 million to reconsider her findings. Now they were trying a different approach. Alexander Blackwood's office was exactly what she'd expected. All glass, chrome, and power. The man himself stood by the window, his reflection a dark silhouette against Boston's skyline. He turned as she entered, and Sarah felt a momentary flutter of surprise. The photos in the company newsletters hadn't done him justice. Alexander Blackwood was younger than she'd expected, with sharp features and penetrating grey eyes that assessed her with cold calculation. "Dr. Chen," he said, not moving from his position. "Please, have a seat." "I prefer to stand," Sarah replied, matching his tone. She noticed Winston quietly slipping out of the office, closing the door behind him. Alex's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Of course you do. You seem to prefer doing things the hard way. If by hard way you mean the right way, then yes, I do." He moved then, crossing the room with fluid grace to stand before her. "Do you have any idea what you're about to destroy? The thousands of jobs at stake, the patients who rely on our medications." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Do you have any idea how many patients could be harmed by improperly tested drugs? Lives aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, Mr. Blackwood. And what about the lives we've saved?" he countered. "The millions who benefit from our medications. Are you willing to destroy all that good because of some procedural irregularities?" "Procedural irregularities?" Sarah's voice rose slightly. "Your company falsified safety data. People could die, or we could work together to fix this," Alex said, his voice softening deliberately. "I've read your research proposals. Dr. Chen, your ideas for improving trial protocols are innovative. Implementation would be expensive, but with the right support." Sarah felt a cold anger building in her chest. "Are you trying to bribe me again? Because $2 million wasn't enough, so now you're offering research funding." "I'm offering you a partnership." Alex moved closer, and Sarah forced herself not to step back. "Marry me?" The words hung in the air between them. Sarah stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "It's a simple solution," he continued, as if proposing a business merger. "You become part of the family, get a seat on the board, and the authority to implement your reforms. We gradually correct the trial protocols, maintain public trust, and save thousands of jobs in the process." Sarah felt a laugh bubble up in her throat, a sharp, bitter sound. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." His eyes held hers. "Think about it, Dr. Chen. How long have you been fighting to change the system from the inside? With my resources and your expertise, we could revolutionize how drug trials are conducted. Isn't that worth considering? You want me to compromise my principles to save your company? I want you to expand your vision," he corrected. "Sometimes the right path isn't the straightest one." Sarah shook her head, amazed at his audacity. "And I suppose love doesn't factor into this equation at all. We're both pragmatists, Dr. Chen. This is about doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people." "No, Mr. Blackwood, this is about you trying to save your empire without actually changing anything fundamental. You want to use my reputation to cover up years of corruption." Alex's expression hardened. "And you want to tear down decades of medical advancement because of some absolutist moral stance. The world isn't black and white, Doctor. Sometimes we have to compromise to make real change." "There's a difference between compromise and complicity," Sarah shot back. She turned toward the door, then paused. "You know what the saddest part is? You actually believe what you're saying. You've convinced yourself that protecting profits is the same as protecting people. You have until tomorrow to decide, Alex called after her. After that, I can't stop what's coming. Sarah turned back, a hand on the door handle. Is that a threat, Mr. Blackwood? It's reality. Once the FDA investigation becomes public, every drug trial we've conducted will be scrutinized, including the ones that have genuinely saved lives. Are you ready to be responsible for that? For a moment, Sarah felt the weight of the choice before her. She thought of the research she could do with Blackwood's resources, the changes she could implement. But then she remembered the falsified data, the risks to patients, the casual disregard for human life in pursuit of profit. I'll see myself out, she said quietly. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Sarah leaned against the wall, her hands trembling slightly. She'd expected threats or bribes, not a marriage proposal. The worst part was, she could almost see the logic in his plan. Almost. Her phone buzzed. A text from the FDA investigator she'd been working with. Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bringing DOJ attorneys. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of Alexander Blackwood's last words. He was right about one thing. Once this started, there would be no stopping it. The question was, could she live with the consequences? What she didn't know was that Alex Blackwood wasn't done negotiating, and his next move would change everything she thought she knew about him and his father's company. The morning sun cast long shadows across Sarah's small office at Blackwood Medical Industries as she packed her personal belongings into a cardboard box. After yesterday's confrontation with Alexander Blackwood, she knew her time here was limited. Her fingers traced the edges of a framed photograph, her graduating class from medical school, faces bright with hope and purpose, 7 years of research, countless late nights in the lab, all leading to this moment of truth. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She expected security, coming to escort her out. Instead, she found Winston Hayes, looking older and more tired than she'd ever seen him. "Dr. Chen," he said softly, "there's something you need to see." He held out a worn leather journal, its pages yellow with age. This belonged to Thomas Blackwood, Alex's father. I've been holding on to it since his death, waiting for the right moment. Sarah hesitated before taking it. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to understand the whole story before you make your decision. Thomas wasn't who you think he was, neither is Alex." Winston's voice cracked slightly. "Read it, please. If you still want to go to the FDA afterward, I won't stop you." After Winston left, Sarah opened the journal with trembling hands. The handwriting was precise, methodical, much like the man she'd known Thomas Blackwood to be. But as she began to read, a very different picture emerged. March 15th, 2022. The board is pushing for faster results on CardioMax. The preliminary data isn't what we hoped for, but they want to proceed anyway. I've tried explaining that we need more testing, more time to understand the long-term effects, but the shareholders are getting impatient. God help me. I've spent 30 years building this company, and now I'm watching it turn into everything I fought against. Sarah's breath caught as she continued reading. Entry after entry detailed Thomas Blackwood's growing horror at what his company was becoming. He discovered the data manipulation in the research division. But instead of exposing it immediately, he'd begun a careful investigation, gathering evidence against the board members responsible. June 3rd, 2022. Met with Dr. Sarah Chen today. Her research proposals are exactly what this company needs. Ethical, innovative, and patient-focused. I see in her the same fire I had when I started this company. I'm going to fast-track her proposals, but I have to move carefully. The board is watching everything I do. Sarah remembered that meeting. Thomas had been enthusiastic about her ideas, but weeks later, her proposals were mysteriously delayed. Now she understood why. A loose paper fell from between the pages, a letter addressed to Alex, dated just days before Thomas's death. "My son, if you're reading this, something has happened to me before I could finish what I started. The company is sick, Alex. Not just the trials division. The corruption goes deeper. I've been gathering evidence, building a case. Dr. Chen's research isn't just innovative, it's our salvation. Her protocols would force transparency, make it impossible to hide the kind of manipulation that's been happening. I know you'll want to protect our legacy, but remember what I taught you. A legacy isn't about profit margins or stock prices. It's about the lives we touch, the people we help. Dr. Chen understands this. Trust her. Work with her. She's the key to saving everything we built, not by covering up our mistakes, but by helping us become what we should have been all along. I love you, son. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you through what's coming. Dad. Sarah sat back, her mind reeling. The journal entries continued, detailing Thomas's plan to clean up the company from within. He'd been working with the FDA quietly, preparing to expose the corruption while protecting the legitimate research. His heart attack had come just weeks before he planned to act. A soft knock made her jump. Alexander Blackwood stood in her doorway, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more vulnerable. I see Winston brought you my father's journal, he said quietly. Did you know? Sarah asked, holding up the letter. Did you know what your father was planning? Alex entered the office, closing the door behind him. I found out 2 days ago. Winston finally told me everything. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger, less certain. I've been such a fool, Dr. Chen. I thought I was protecting my father's legacy, but I was destroying everything he really stood for. Sarah studied him carefully. Why the marriage proposal then? Why not just tell me the truth? Because I was scared, he admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice surprised her. Scared of change. Scared of admitting how far we'd fallen. It was easier to think we could control you, use your reputation to buy time. I was wrong. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on her desk. This contains everything my father collected, account records, emails, board meeting minutes, evidence of every falsified trial, every covered-up side effect. I'm turning it over to the FDA. Sarah stared at the flash drive, then back at Alex. You understand what this means? The company will survive, he interrupted. But it needs to change. My father was right about one thing. Your research protocols are the key. We need to rebuild from the ground up with complete transparency and ethical oversight. He paused, meeting her eyes. I'm not asking you to marry me anymore, Dr. Chen. I'm asking you to help me fix this the right way. Sarah picked up the flash drive, turning it over in her hands. Why should I trust you? Because I'm not my father's son, just in name. He taught me that real leadership means admitting when you're wrong and having the courage to change course. Alex's voice grew stronger. The board meeting is in an hour. I'm going to announce a complete restructuring. Half the board will probably resign in protest. We'll take a massive hit in the stock market. But it's the right thing to do. He turned to leave, then stopped. You know what really convinced me? Reading about your research. You're not just trying to expose problems, you're offering solutions. Real, practical ways to conduct better trials, ensure patient safety, and still develop the medications people need. That's the kind of legacy I want to build. Sarah felt a shift in her perception of Alexander Blackwood. The arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by someone more complex, more human. Someone who, like her, was trying to navigate the gray areas between right and wrong. I'll need complete autonomy in restructuring the research division, she said finally. Alex's face broke into a genuine smile, the first she'd seen from him. Done. Whatever you need, and a public admission of wrongdoing. No spinning, no covering up. The patients deserve to know the truth. I agree. We'll hold a press conference after the board meeting. Full disclosure. Sarah stood up, leaving the half-packed box on her desk. Then we should get to work. The board won't like what they're about to hear. As they walked together toward the conference room, Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions. This wasn't the outcome she'd expected when she first discovered the falsified data. She'd thought she was starting a fight, but instead, she might be starting something much more important, a transformation. Dr. Chen, Alex said as they reached the conference room doors, thank you for not giving up on us. Sarah looked at him, seeing not the entitled millionaire she'd first met, but a man struggling to live up to his father's true legacy. "Thank you for choosing to be better." The board members were already seated, watching with surprise as Alex and Sarah entered together. Winston Hayes caught her eye and nodded slightly, a look of relief on his face. As Alex took his place at the head of the table, Sarah saw something in his posture that reminded her of the man she'd read about in that journal, Thomas Blackwood before the corruption, when his dream was still pure. What none of them knew was that the next few hours would set in motion changes that would ripple through the entire pharmaceutical industry. But that was a battle for another day. Right now, they had a company to save. The right way, this time. The headlines were brutal. Blackwood Medical Industries admits to falsified trial data. Pharmaceutical giant faces multiple investigations. Blackwood stock plummets 60% after CEO's shocking announcement. Sarah stood in Alex's office, watching him read through the morning papers scattered across his desk. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights, but his posture remained determined. 3 weeks had passed since their dramatic board meeting, where Alex had exposed everything and announced the company's complete restructuring. 7 board members resigned, he said, not looking up from the papers. Our major shareholders are threatening a lawsuit. 3 clinical trials have been suspended. He finally raised his eyes to meet hers. Still think we did the right thing? You know we did, Sarah replied, taking a seat across from him. But that's not what's really bothering you, is it? Alex was quiet for a moment, turning to look out at the Boston skyline. The cancer ward at Mass General called this morning. They're concerned about continuing our partnership for the pediatric treatment program my father started. 15 years of providing free medications to children who can't afford them. And now, his voice cracked slightly. How many people are we hurting by trying to do the right thing? Sarah moved to stand beside him at the window. We're not hurting them, Alex. The people who falsified those trials hurt them. We're trying to fix it. Are we? He turned to face her, and Sarah saw the weight of responsibility in his eyes. Sometimes I wonder if we should have found a different way. Implemented changes gradually, kept the damage contained, like your father tried to do. Sarah interrupted gently. How did that work out? The question hung in the air between them. They both knew the answer. Thomas Blackwood's careful, gradual approach had allowed the corruption to continue too long, ultimately contributing to his death. You're right, Alex admitted. I need to know we can save enough of the good to make this worth it. Sarah reached for the stack of papers on his desk. Not newspapers this time, but research proposals and trial protocols she'd been developing. Look at these. 3 new partnerships with independent research facilities, transparent data sharing protocols, real-time trial monitoring systems. We're not just cleaning up the mess, we're building something better. As they reviewed the documents together, their shoulders touching, Sarah noticed how naturally they'd fallen into this pattern over the past weeks. The initial antagonism had given way to a partnership based on shared purpose and growing respect. Alex's business acumen complemented her scientific expertise, and together they were navigating challenges neither could have faced alone. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Winston Hayes entered, looking grave. The FDA investigators are here, and they've brought someone with them. Dr. Marcus Reynolds walked in behind Winston, and Sarah felt Alex tense beside her. Reynolds had been the research director who'd overseen many of the falsified trials. He'd resigned the day after their announcement and disappeared. Dr. Reynolds has agreed to provide evidence against certain board members, Winston explained carefully, in exchange for consideration in his own case. Reynolds looked smaller somehow, his usual arrogance replaced by nervous energy. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Chen, he swallowed hard, I want to make things right. Over the next 2 hours, Reynolds laid out a pattern of corruption that went back further than even Thomas Blackwood had known. Board members had been pressuring researchers for years, threatening careers, offering bonuses for favorable results. Reynolds himself had been both victim and perpetrator, trapped in a system he helped maintain. Your father, Reynolds said to Alex. He tried to protect us from the board's pressure, but after his heart condition was diagnosed, they used it against him, threatened to reveal that he was unfit to lead if he didn't cooperate. Alex's hands clenched into fists. They blackmailed him. They called it incentivizing cooperation. That's when he started gathering evidence against them. But he was worried about the timing. He knew the shock to the company could destroy everything, including the charitable programs. Sarah watched Alex absorb this information, seeing the complex mix of emotions cross his face. Anger, grief, vindication. She found herself reaching for his hand under the table, a gesture of support that surprised them both. More surprising was how naturally his fingers interlaced with hers. After Reynolds and the FDA team left, Alex remained silent for a long time. Sarah stayed beside him, their hands still linked, offering quiet support. "We need to call an emergency shareholder meeting," he said finally. "Full disclosure of everything Reynolds told us. We show them that transparency is our only path forward." "They'll panic," Sarah warned. "The stock will drop even further. Then we'll need something else to show them." Alex turned to her, his eyes brightening with an idea. "Your new trial protocols. How soon could we implement them? With proper funding and support? 2 months for the pilot program. But Alex, we'd need at least 50 million in new equipment and staffing." "Done." He was already reaching for his phone. "Winston, get me the investment committee. And call Dr. Marshall at Mass General. Tell him the pediatric program isn't just continuing, it's expanding." Sarah stared at him. "Alex, we can't afford not to," he interrupted. "You were right from the beginning, Sarah. The only way through this is to be better, not just to clean up the old problems, but to set new standards, to show everyone that ethical research isn't just morally right, it's good business." Their eyes met, and Sarah saw something there that made her heart skip. Not the cold calculation of their first meeting, but passion, determination, and something warmer, something growing between them that neither had expected. "We'll need to work late again," she said softly. "We always do." His smile was tired but genuine. "Chinese or Thai tonight?" "Thai. But first we need to talk about the Robinson trial data. The independent review panel found some discrepancies that—" Alex held up a hand, laughing slightly. "Work before dinner. You're a harsh taskmaster, Dr. Chen. Someone has to keep you focused, Mr. Blackwood." They spent the next several hours poring over data, preparing presentations, and strategizing their approach to the shareholders. As night fell over Boston, they sat surrounded by papers and empty takeout containers, the lights of the city twinkling below. "My father would have liked you," Alex said suddenly. "Not just your research, your integrity, your determination." Sarah looked up from her laptop. "I liked him too. He was trying to do the right thing in his way. We're doing it better," Alex said firmly. "Together." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah felt her cheeks warm slightly. "Alex, about what's happening between us. You mean how we've gone from you threatening to destroy my company to having dinner together every night? How you've somehow become the person I trust most in the world? How I can't imagine doing any of this without you?" "Yes," Sarah said softly. "That." Alex set down his papers and turned to face her fully. "I'm not going to propose again, at least not for the wrong reasons. But I think we both know this is more than just a professional partnership now." Sarah thought about the past weeks, the late nights, the shared challenges, the growing understanding between them. She thought about how his touch had gone from something she avoided to something she sought out, how his perspective had shifted from profit-focused to people-focused, how he'd thrown himself into understanding her research, while she'd learned to appreciate the complex business decisions he faced. "It wouldn't be simple," she said carefully. "The board, the shareholders, they'd question everything we've done if they thought we were personally involved. Since when do we do anything the simple way?" His smile was warm, inviting. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Before Sarah could respond, Winston burst into the office, his face pale. "Alex, you need to see this. Someone leaked Reynolds' testimony to the press. The evening news is running with it now." Alex was on his feet instantly, turning on the office television. The story was already breaking. Detailed accusations against board members, allegations of systematic corruption, and evidence that the problems went beyond Blackwood to other pharmaceutical companies. "This changes everything," Sarah breathed, watching the coverage. "The whole industry will be under scrutiny now." Alex nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Then we'll need to be ready. If we can demonstrate a working model of ethical research and transparent trials, we could set the standard for the entire industry," Sarah finished. "But we'll need help. Allies in other companies, support from regulatory agencies, and someone by my side who knows both the science and the ethics inside and out." Alex turned to her. "Partners." Sarah looked at his extended hand, then up into his eyes. She saw there not the entitled millionaire she'd first met, but a man who'd faced his failures and chosen to be better, a man she was rapidly falling in love with. She took his hand. Partners. What they didn't know was that the industry-wide scandal about to break would test their partnership, both professional and personal, in ways neither could have anticipated. But for now, they stood together, ready to face whatever came next. 6 months had passed since the industry-wide scandal broke, and Blackwood Medical Industries' main auditorium was packed to capacity. Sarah watched from backstage as Alex made final adjustments to his presentation. In an hour, they would announce the results of their first fully transparent drug trial, a moment that would either vindicate their entire approach or prove their critics right. "The shareholders are getting restless," Winston reported, joining Sarah backstage. "The stock's down another 5 points this morning." Sarah nodded, her eyes still on Alex. "They're worried we'll announce more problems." "Are we?" Winston asked quietly. "No," Sarah smiled. "We're announcing hope." The past 6 months had been the most challenging of their lives. The pharmaceutical industry's scandal had grown far beyond Blackwood, exposing systematic problems across multiple companies. 3 major CEOs had resigned, stock markets had plunged, congressional hearings had been called. But amid the chaos, Blackwood had emerged as something unexpected, a model for reform. Sarah's transparent trial protocols, implemented under Alex's leadership, had drawn attention from regulators and researchers worldwide. They'd faced fierce resistance, countless setbacks, and more than a few attempts to undermine their work, but they'd persevered. Alex caught Sarah's eye from across the stage and gave her a subtle wink. She felt the now familiar flutter in her heart, remembering how their relationship had evolved through the crisis. They'd kept things professional in public, but their late nights working together had gradually transformed into shared dinners, long conversations, and eventually a deep connection neither had expected. 2 minutes, the stage manager called. Sarah straightened Alex's tie as he joined her backstage. "Ready? With you here?" "Always." He caught her hand as she withdrew it, pressing a quick kiss to her palm. "Still think I'm the enemy of medical ethics? Still think I'm a self-righteous troublemaker?" She countered with a smile. "Every day." His eyes softened. "The best kind." Their playful moment was interrupted by a commotion at the auditorium's entrance. Dr. Marcus Reynolds was being escorted in by security, looking uncomfortable in the crowd of reporters and shareholders. "What's he doing here?" Sarah whispered. "I invited him," Alex replied. "He took responsibility, testified against the corrupt board members, and helped us identify problems we might have missed. He deserves to see what his honesty helped build." Sarah squeezed his hand, remembering how far Alex had come from the man who once suggested buying her silence. "Your father would be proud of you." The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the presentation. Alex took the stage to polite applause, facing an audience that included shareholders, FDA officials, and media representatives from around the world. 6 months ago, he began, I stood before many of you and admitted that Blackwood Medical Industries had lost its way. We had prioritized profits over people, speed over safety, and image over integrity. The easy path would have been to make minor changes, offer careful apologies, and wait for the storm to pass. He paused, his eyes finding Sarah in the wings. But sometimes the right path isn't the easy one. Thanks to Dr. Sarah Chen's innovative research protocols and unwavering ethical stance, we chose a different way forward. Today, I'm here to share the results of that decision. The presentation that followed was comprehensive and unflinching. Alex and Sarah took turns explaining their new trial methodology, the enhanced safety protocols, and the revolutionary data sharing system that allowed real-time monitoring of all trials by independent observers. And now, Alex said, reaching the crucial moment, the results of our first fully transparent trial for CardioMax 2.0. The room grew silent. The original CardioMax trial had been at the center of the scandal. Its successor would either redeem or destroy them. The data shows, Sarah stepped forward, taking her place beside Alex, that CardioMax 2.0 is effective in 72% of cases with significantly fewer side effects than existing treatments. These results have been independently verified by 3 separate research institutions, and all trial data is available for public review. She took a deep breath before continuing. The numbers are lower than what was initially claimed for the original CardioMax. But they're real, they're accurate, and most importantly, they're safe. Alex stepped forward again. We're not here to promise miracles. We're here to deliver honest, effective treatments that doctors can prescribe with confidence and patients can trust with their lives. That was my father's original vision for this company, and it's the legacy we're reclaiming today. The presentation concluded with the announcement that Blackwood would be establishing an independent ethics oversight board, with Dr. Reynolds serving as a consultant to help identify and prevent potential compliance issues before they developed. As questions began from the audience, Sarah noticed something remarkable. The usual skepticism was being replaced by genuine interest. Reporters were asking about the methodology rather than the scandal. Shareholders were inquiring about long-term implementation rather than short-term stock prices. After the formal presentation, Alex and Sarah found themselves surrounded by well-wishers and interested parties. The FDA representatives were particularly impressed with the real-time monitoring system. Dr. Chen, one of them said, we're considering making your protocols the new industry standard. Would you be willing to consult with other companies on implementation? Before Sarah could respond, Alex stepped in. Dr. Chen will be a bit busy in the coming months. We're expanding our research division and promoting her to Chief Research Officer. Sarah turned to him in surprise. This was the first she'd heard of it. That is, Alex added with a slight smile, if she accepts the position. Trying to keep me close, Mr. Blackwood? She asked quietly as the FDA representatives moved away. Actually, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. I was hoping for something more permanent. Sarah's breath caught as she realized what was happening. Around them, the crowd continued to mill about, but somehow this moment felt completely private. The first time I proposed, Alex said softly, it was for all the wrong reasons. I wanted to control you, to protect my company's interests. I didn't understand then what real partnership meant. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. This time, I'm asking because I love you, because you made me a better man, because I can't imagine facing another challenge or celebrating another victory without you by my side. Sarah looked at the ring, then at Alex, seeing in his eyes all the changes they'd been through together. You realize this will complicate everything? The board, the shareholders? Since when do we do anything the simple way? He smiled, echoing their conversation from months ago. Sarah took the ring, sliding it onto her finger. Yes, to both offers. Their kiss was interrupted by applause. Their private moment had drawn an audience after all. Winston was beaming. Even Dr. Reynolds managed a genuine smile. Later that evening, after the press had gone and the excitement had died down, Sarah and Alex stood in his office, their office now, looking out over the Boston skyline. The hard part's just beginning, Sarah said, leaning against him. Implementing these changes industry-wide, maintaining our standards as we grow. Managing a relationship in the spotlight, Alex added, balancing our personal and professional lives. Having everyone question whether I earned my position. Proving we can stay ethical as we expand. They looked at each other and laughed. The challenges ahead somehow less daunting when faced together. You know, Alex said thoughtfully, my father wrote in his journal about wanting to leave a legacy that meant something. I think he'd be happy to know that his company's greatest contribution wasn't just the medicines we make, but the way we make them. Sarah touched the ring on her finger, thinking about legacy, love, and the unexpected paths that lead us to where we're meant to be. We're not just changing an industry, she said. We're changing lives. Starting with our own, Alex added, pulling her close. As night fell over Boston, the lights of the city twinkled below like stars. In Thomas Blackwood's old office, his son and future daughter-in-law continued planning their shared future, one that would honor the past while blazing a trail towards something new and better. They had transformed a company, revolutionized an industry, and found love in the most unlikely circumstances. But their greatest legacy would be showing that doing the right thing, no matter how difficult, was always worth the cost. The next morning's headlines would be positive for the first time in months. Blackwood leads industry reform with revolutionary trial results. Ethical research proves profitable. Proves. A new era in pharmaceutical development. Blackwood CEO and Chief Research Officer announce engagement, a merger of minds and hearts. But for now, in the quiet of their office, Sarah and Alex held each other, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, together.
If this story has touched your heart and you want to keep discovering more moments of transformation and deep emotions, subscribe to the channel and join our community. Don't forget to leave a comment, give us a like if you enjoyed it, and most importantly, join us for the next video. Each story is a doorway to a new perspective, and together, we're creating a space to reflect and connect with experiences that truly matter.